Elias Turner had no living family left. Grandma May, his last relative, died when he was 12. Her house on Old Briar Road had been empty ever since, rotting into the earth, swallowed by vines and silence. So when he found the invitation in his mailbox, he thought it had to be a joke. Thanksgiving supper, Grandma May's house, Old Briar Road, 6 p.m. Family awaits. The paper looked decades old. The ink was faded brown. And the handwriting, he knew that handwriting. He had watched that hand stroke his hair, wipe his tears, pull pies from the oven. Grandma May. He stared at the card for a long time. By the time he realized he had gotten into his car and started driving, it was already dusk. The old farmhouse looked worse than he remembered. Half the roof had collapsed. Windows were broken, curtains fluttering like torn skin. The porch boards sagged like a rib cage. The front door hung open just an inch, enough for warm golden light to spill out, but the house had been abandoned for years. There was no power, no one to light a candle, no one to be home, yet lights flickered inside. Elias's breath fogged in the cold as he stepped onto the porch. Each board groaned under him, and somewhere inside something answered, a slow, dragging shuffle. He froze. Then a voice called out, "Eli, that you, sweetheart?" He nearly vomited. Grandma May, her voice exactly the same, soft, warm, gentle, dead for 15 years. Elias pushed the door open. The interior of the house shouldn't have been possible. The walls were clean, the floors polished, the old floral rug lay perfectly flat, free of dust. The table was set with candles and polished silverware. A turkey steamed at the center, skin golden, glistening, and around the table, his family, all of them dead. Uncle Harold, who drowned, Cousin Mitch, who hung himself, Aunt Darlene, who died in her sleep. Their faces looked normal at first, but the longer he stared, the more wrongness he saw. Their skin too tight, their smiles too wide, their eyes too fixed on him. Grandma May stepped out from the kitchen. Her apron was spotless, her hair perfectly curled, her face pale as wax. "Eli," she whispered, arms outstretched. "Come home." He didn't move. She came to him, hugged him, squeezed him. He felt bone under her dress, dry, brittle bone. When she released him, her hands left faint gray fingerprints on his jacket. "Sit, sweetheart," she said. "Thanksgiving's no time to be alone." Elias sat at the table because his legs refused to let him run. Grandma placed a slice of turkey on his plate. Thick, pinkish meat. Too pink. It smelled sweet, almost like cooked sugar. "Eat," she said. He stared around the table. His relatives waited, motionless, smiling. Their teeth were yellow and sharp, not human sharp, animal sharp. Grandma frowned. "You don't look grateful, Eli. After all this time, we came back just for you." Uncle Harold leaned forward, his neck cracking. "It's tradition, boy," he rasped. "Family eats together." Aunt Darlene giggled. Her jaw unhinged faintly when she laughed. Grandma tapped her knife. "Elias Turner," she said softly. "Eat." He picked up the fork, sliced, raised the piece to his mouth. His hand trembled violently. He tasted it. It wasn't turkey. It was sweet and fatty and horribly, horribly familiar. Grandma smiled. "That was your father," she said gently. Elias gagged, spraying the morsel onto his plate. His relatives laughed, a chorus of dry, rattling breaths. "You always were a picky eater," Grandma sighed. Then she looked at the others. "Well," she said, "then we'll start without him." The lights flickered. The room grew dim. Elias backed away from the table, but his chair skidded, trapping him. Hands, cold, bony, digging into his shoulders, held him down. Grandma reached into her apron. She pulled out a long carving knife, not old, not rusty, freshly sharpened. Family. Must feed family, she said. His relatives stood as one, scraping chairs across the floorboards, their mouths stretched wider, breaking at the seams, their eyes rolled white. Grandma raised the blade. "Let us give thanks," she whispered. They descended. The last thing Elias felt was their hands. Too many hands, pinning him, tearing at his clothes, their mouths opening wide enough to crack bone. The last thing he heard was Grandma's voice near his ear, soft as lullaby. "Next year, sweetheart, we'll invite someone new." Days passed. The house returned to rot. The dining room went dark. The plates sat empty. The old farmhouse sat abandoned again. Eric didn't usually accept holiday invitations. Most years he spent Thanksgiving alone with a frozen meal and whatever movie marathon he could find. But this November had felt especially empty. His new coworker, Melissa, bright, warm, always wearing a cardigan the color of fallen leaves, had noticed. "You shouldn't be alone on Thanksgiving," she told him as they stood by the office coffee machine. "My family would love to have you, truly." She said it with such earnestness that Eric felt guilty refusing, so he didn't. Melissa's family lived far outside town, past the last gas station, past the old grain silos, in a clearing surrounded by maple trees, stripped bare by the wind. Her house looked old. Not historic charming, but time-worn. A place where clocks might stop working and shadows linger too long. The front door opened before they even reached the porch. "Welcome, Eric," said a woman who looked too much like Melissa to be anything but her sister. Behind her, several other relatives stood waiting, smiling too wide, as if they'd been rehearsing. "You must be starving," the sister said, closing the door behind him with a soft click. The kitchen smelled amazing. Roast turkey, spices, something earthy and sweet. Yet underneath it was another smell. Metallic, faint but sharp enough to sting the back of his throat. He tried to ignore it. They handed him spiced cider, warm and fragrant. He sipped it politely. "You work with our Melissa?" an older man asked. His eyes never quite blinked. "Yes," Eric said. "She just started a few weeks ago." The whole table exchanged looks, subtle, satisfied. "Oh, she does that," the older man said. "Always picks up a job around this time. Seasonal work," Melissa added cheerfully. "Keeps things fresh." The family chuckled. Eric didn't understand the joke, but the room suddenly felt warmer. Too warm. It started when Eric excused himself to find the bathroom. The hallway was lined with old photographs, sepia portraits of people who all looked vaguely like Melissa. None of them ever smiled. He'd passed a door with a heavy iron latch. It was the only door in the house that was locked. Just as he walked by it, something thumped from the other side. Once, then again, wet, dragging. He froze. Behind him, Melissa appeared so quietly, he wondered if she'd been standing there the whole time. "Wrong door," she said in a voice too soft. "Bathroom's the next one." Her hand closed gently around his shoulder, guiding him. Too tight, too familiar. When he returned to the dining room, the platter was already on the table. The turkey looked wrong. Its shape was uneven, its skin oddly mottled, and there were no carving marks, just thick crimson streaks staining the platter's edge. "That doesn't smell like turkey," Eric said before he could stop himself. The family went still. Melissa leaned close. "You said you didn't have family, no spouse, no one expecting you tomorrow, right?" His heart began to pound. "That's why I invited you," she whispered. The candles flickered. Every face at the table turned toward him, hungry in a way that had nothing to do with food. "You know," Melissa said thoughtfully, picking up a carving knife, Every November, our family gives thanks, but giving thanks means giving something back. She smiled. And every year, she continued, sliding the blade across the thing on the platter, I get a seasonal job to meet someone who won't be missed. The room erupted into prayerful murmurs, something ancient, rhythmic, almost song-like. Eric lunged for the door. Hands grabbed him. Dozens, clawing, clutching, pulling him back toward the table. Don't struggle, Melissa said, almost kindly. You were chosen. Be grateful. The following year in November, Melissa showed up at work, a new job, in a new state, and bright as ever, a new fall-colored cardigan and a thermos of steaming soup. No one questioned her about Eric's disappearance last fall, and no one would. They never did. By lunch, she'd already introduced herself to the guy in accounting, a quiet man recently relocated, no family nearby, wearing loneliness on his sleeves like a name tag. She smiled warmly and said, You shouldn't be alone on Thanksgiving. The cabin belonged to the Whitcombs, and like everything the Whitcombs owned, it was old, remote, and heavy with secrets. Eleanor and Mark received the invitation every year, Thanksgiving dinner in the family tradition. And every year their grandmother made the same demand. The candle must burn from the first blessing to the final bite. Not one flicker must die. This year the woods felt different, thicker. Listening. They arrived before sunset, stomping snow from their boots. In the center of the long dining table sat the object of their grandmother's obsession, a squat beeswax candle, yellowed with age, wick blackened from countless Thanksgivings. It's the same one, Mark whispered. Same family, Eleanor muttered. Same rules. Their grandmother, white hair braided tight, lit the wick with shaking fingers. The tiny flame wavered, then steadied, warm and golden. Immediately the cabin seemed to relax, as if something outside had been waiting for the spark. Dinner began in stiff silence. Every time the flame bent, their grandmother froze. Her cloudy eyes tracked the candle like a falcon watching a mouse. Why this candle? Eleanor finally asked, her grandmother's fork stilled. To remember, she answered, and to keep it out. What is it? You don't want to know. Outside, the wind pressed hard against the shutters, though there was no storm in the forecast. Tree branches scraped the roof like claws. Mark leaned toward Eleanor. This is ridiculous. It's a candle, not a... A sudden rattle shook the front door. 3 slow knocks followed. The candle sputtered. Their grandmother's breath hitched. Do not answer, she hissed, and do not let that flame die. They tried to ignore the knocks. They tried to keep dinner going, hands trembling as they passed dishes. But the wind grew stronger. The shutters slammed. The walls groaned. Somewhere in the woods, something howled, long, mournful, and not quite human. The candle flame danced violently, stretching thin, shrinking, flaring again. Grandma, Eleanor whispered, you're scaring us. Good, she said. Fear keeps you alert, keeps you alive. A sudden gust, stronger than any breeze that should have reached inside, whipped through the dining room. Every napkin flew. The curtains blew sideways, and the flame went out, just like that. The wick curled into darkness. Their grandmother screamed. The cabin shadows thickened all at once, pooling in the corners like oil. The air grew heavy, colder. Outside, something stepped onto the porch, slow, deliberate, weighty enough to creak the planks. Mark stood and grabbed a fire-starting stick. I'll relight it. But their grandmother lunged across the table with surprising strength. No! Once it goes out, it won't accept fire from inside. You must take it to the tree line. A clawed hand scraped across the window. Not a hand. Too long. Too many joints. Eleanor grabbed the candle. Go, her grandmother commanded. before it crosses the threshold!" They burst through the front door into freezing darkness. The woods had changed. Trees leaned inward, branches knotted like ribs. Snow hissed upward instead of falling down. Something large paced between the trunks, circling them. It moved without sound, except for the faint crackle of dead leaves turning to ash under its steps. "Stop looking at it," Eleanor whispered, because the longer Mark stared, the more the shape sharpened into something wrong, something hungry, ancient, almost familiar. They reached the tree line where the Whitcomb land ended and the protected wild began. Their grandmother hobbled behind them, breath ragged. "It wants what it was promised," she gasped. "What was promised?" Mark shouted. "Our fear," she answered. "Our gratitude. Our memory. This family survived these woods because we fed it our thanks each year, kept it lulled with the candle's light." A deep, wet inhale filled the clearing, like lungs awakening after centuries underwater. The creature emerged, a towering shape of matted hair, antlered shadows, and eyes bright as dying coals. Eleanor's voice trembled. "It's real. God, it's real." "It always was," their grandmother whispered. She pressed a trembling matchbox into Eleanor's hands. "Light the candle. Let it taste your fear. Humble yourselves before it, or we all die here." With shaking hands, Eleanor struck a match. The creature lowered its head, curious, expectant. The match burned bright, then blew out. The woods laughed. The trees shook. Another match, another puff of impossible wind. Mark held the candle up. "Try again," he whispered. Eleanor struck a third match, cupping it with both hands. This time the flame caught. The wick glowed, and the candle bloomed with light, too bright, too warm, as if relieved. The creature froze, snarling silently. Shadows peeled back. The trees straightened. Slowly it retreated, dissolving into the deeper dark of the forest, leaving behind only its echoing breath. The wind died. The cabin lights flickered back on. Their grandmother exhaled in a shuddering sob. "It will sleep now," she whispered, "until next Thanksgiving." Mark stared at the flickering candle. "We're never doing this again." But the flame swayed gently, almost knowingly, because some debts aren't allowed to end, not when the woods are still hungry, not when the family still breathes, and the candle would need to burn again.